For this next session, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Feliz Levine, who is currently the Executive Director of the American Educational Research Association, which many of us know as a particularly important worldwide body, in fact, not just in the US. She is a social psychologist. She was previously the Executive Officer of the American Sociological Association, as well as being on the Council of the American Psychological Association, and also has been with the NSF. So a distinguished career, and certainly somebody who is more than qualified to give us a perspective from the USA. And we are asked whether or not America will follow us. Feliz is going to talk for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have time for 15 minutes questions, interaction from the floor before we go to lunch. Over to you.
Thank you. Now my biggest challenge is which pair of glasses do I wear? So, I thought I would at least open with which pair will I wear? With some, I guess, formal remarks just to sort of map the terrain that I think we're experiencing or trying to reflect on in a way that will lead to and perhaps enable some constructive ways that the social and behavioral science community can get a bit ahead of the curve, fast-moving curve or fast-moving target, and ramp up our voice and our presence, something I hope we might be able to do together. So I want to just start by saying it's an honor and pleasure to be able to participate in and speak at this conference on implementing Finch. I arrived on Wednesday, I think, and I was here yesterday, and I benefit from and learned from the lively discussion. As Dame Janet Finch reminded us yesterday, especially at the end, the title of her report, or the report, is Accessibility, Sustainability, and Excellence in Research Publications. These are shared and laudable goals. It's sort of apple pie and motherhood. That's, something we would all believe in. I suppose being the name of a hot-button report can be a bit unsettling as one goes from meeting to meeting, so I took note of that as a kind of closing statement that she makes. Before I start, I want particularly to thank Stephen Anderson, Executive Director of the Academy. It was he who thought that the consideration of open access in the UK should be situated within the broader context of such considerations in the United States. I hope both to give you some of that picture and to take home some of what I have learned over the past day and a half, and glean from your discussions. I was asked by Stephen, as I was just introduced, to provide the U.S. perspective on the Finch Report and its likely impact in the United States. These are complex questions, and I hope by the end of my overview on open access publishing in the U.S. to have at least provided a reasonable response. I should say at the outset that I'm not in any way the spokesperson for U.S. learned societies in the social and behavioral sciences. Shortly, I'll report on a conference that the American Education Research Association convened on open access publishing in the social sciences, and I guess we were indeed comparing dates of when this meeting was going to be and when one that AERA was holding on November 10th would be. I can also report that my work is embedded in a number of social science fields. As the very gracious introduction emphasized, my own work has cut across sociology, psychology, political science, and socio-legal studies, and that my substantive research areas are in research and science policy, and in particular in data sharing, data access, and research ethics. Finally, I can report that increasingly over the last 3 decades, and I see a similar dynamic here, there's been quite a bit of collaboration and consultation across what we term SBS fields, with open access having become a high priority topic over more recent years. In this context, I would like to say first and foremost that the Finch Report has been noticed on the U.S. side of the pond, and that it's generated a degree of concern that regulation may move faster than deliberation. I am reasonably confident, as I will address below, that in the United States, open access principles and policies will unfold somewhat differently. It may be that the Finch experience itself has further heightened sensitivity in the U.S. on the complexities of transforming publishing business models, especially for scientific societies. In my presentation today, I hope to provide a window on open access publishing and social science from the U.S. side. Just as Stephen has reached out to me to attend this conference on behalf of my U.S. counterparts, I want to reach out to you to continue this conversation beyond today. My aim this morning is not to stand too long between you, our interaction, and lunch, but to speak briefly to 8 issues, and then hopefully address those final 2 questions. Those 8 are the changing ecology of publishing, and I won't say with each one, in social science in the United States, but that's sort of implied, the status of open access publishing, the role of publishing in U.S. social science societies, the AERA Open Access Conference, the benefits of open access publishing, the costs of open access publishing, confronting the challenges of open access publishing and experiments in open access publishing, and then to conclude with some of the next steps that at least our conference raised in terms of U.S. social science. In the United States, social science publishing and learned societies lives within a similar ecology of knowledge production that was so effectively described and elaborated on, especially in the presentations yesterday. The numbers in our fields may be larger, and the way that government funds research quite different, more individually than institutionally based, but we too live in a world that, one, depends on government and private foundation support for a sizable but still small fraction of research. 2, relies on subscription revenue as the backbone for high-quality, peer-reviewed, affordable publishing. And 3, has a relatively stable system of functions and operations for scholars as authors, as reviewers, and for their counterparts in universities, libraries, publishers, and research societies. The social sciences and the environment in which learned societies sit in the United States are also undergoing transformation. The value placed on knowledge, transparency, and accessibility, and the way that scientists and citizens obtain information are changing over the last 2 decades in rapid ways. Over the past 10 years, it would be fair to say that there has been an increase in effort to make data and research publicly available and free, or at least at cost to the user. These values are articulated by many scholars quite independent of the government seeking to make accessible results supported by public funds. The framing is about a science good as much as a public good. The status of open access publishing in the United States. These changes, some quite fundamental to the culture of science, suggest that we are on a trajectory toward open access and scholarly knowledge, and that the social and behavioral sciences have the challenge and opportunity to devise and test approaches consonant with our fields and how we work. Much of this change has been driven by technological advances and the ways that the internet permit researchers and organizations to share results with each other and broader audiences. It also reflects the transformation in how the new and next generations read and use information and expect to have it accessible. Learning, critical thinking, examination of knowledge are happening in different and rapid ways. Just as scholars are using and mining all forms of data with new forms of access, consonant with confidentiality and human subject protection, I might add, so too are they expecting more ready access to published work and findings. While the quality of a journal continues to matter, now scholars, especially earlier generation ones, search for articles and are less focused on journals or on journal issues. Publication through online first mechanisms makes such content even more readily accessible to subscribers before it is packaged in a published issue, or even before it is known which published issue. In the US, as in the UK, early supporters and adopters of open access publishing have primarily been in the fields of science, technology, and medicine, STM. For example, since 2008, the National Institutes of Health required all researchers funded by NIH to submit a final peer-reviewed copy of any manuscript accepted for publication to the National Library of Medicine, PubMed Central. Since NIH is a major funder of social and behavioral science, these requirements reach to our field. They're major in relative dollars, even though their investment is in the health and well-being area. But in absolute dollars, NIH is a very major funder in the social and behavioral sciences. This full-text archive, PubMed Central, includes more than 2.5 million biomedical and life science journal articles. The U.S. Office of Science and Technology Policy, which we call OSTP, which is the White House Science Advisory Office, provides the President and senior administration officials with scientific and technical advice, along with the U.S. House of Representatives on science and technology. Both have been studying open access for the past few years. OSTP may indeed take steps to increase open access publishing requirements for all federally funded research. Both in 2010 and 2012, OSTP solicited comments largely directed to different models of providing access. A number of U.S. social science societies, including quite explicitly AERA, recommended toll-free links to the articles, to the government agency, and to the author, the latter of which AERA and others have already been providing, and that is that we've been, AERA, for example, and it would be true on a somewhat different time scale for the American Sociological Association and the Association of Psychological Science, had, since each of our partnerships with SAGE, in the case of AERA, we were self-publishing. Once we started those partnerships, we provided automatically toll-free links that could be put on the author's website or the university's archive to authors, and we now do that as a matter of course. And indeed, we've recognized the need to even further emphasize that this is accessible as a matter of course, and I'll say a few more words about that. In the U.S., in terms of national conversations about open access, the social and behavioral sciences, however, have been largely absent until quite recently, despite the fact that any federal policies requiring open access to the results of all federally funded research would affect the social sciences as well as STM fields. While our fields have responded to open comment solicitations by the federal government, in general, there has not been the same level of consideration, engagement, and information available about our sciences, nor have we indeed produced some of the analogous kinds of information that we indeed need to produce. In 2009, the Mellon Foundation supported a planning grant on the future of scholarly journal publishing among social science and humanities associations that provided the first systematic information on 8 journals published by 8 leading U.S. associations, and included a History and Modern Languages Association. This report spoke to the cost of publishing, the substantially lower level of federal funding for the social sciences than STM fields, and that's both variable within specialties within fields as well as between and among fields. The longer shelf life of social science research than STM research, and so forth. Such data underscored that government policies need to be crafted to account for the differences in funding levels, disciplinary norms, and in publishing practices in the social and behavioral sciences, as well as in other STEM fields. Concerns about a one-size-fits-all model in the UK, I think likely to become our mantra of the decade that were so well articulated yesterday, were repeated concerns within the U.S. and also at the conference that we held several weeks ago. Publishing has long been central to the role of social science societies in the United States. Social science societies, and I think all of us as learned societies were founded to facilitate the production of scholarship and the dissemination of knowledge, whether through publications or whether through meetings. Our social science societies serve as disseminators of quality peer-review research in their respective fields. They help shape their fields through the collective and cumulative knowledge of their scholars and based on high standards of peer review. In addition, publishing also helps to support the infrastructure of the social and behavioral sciences themselves. And when I say support, I mean literally support, that the revenue helps support building our fields. Learned societies in the social and behavioral sciences are committed not only to peer review to inform decisions, but also to quality feedback through reviews and editorial guidance that improves the final research reports. Like most other professional societies, the majority of the financial support for AERA comes from the three-legged stool of membership dues, meetings, and publishing. The revenue from these three sources provides the financial support for a broad range of society activities, so it's well beyond cost recovery, including capacity building for the next generation of scholars, for example, small doctoral dissertation research grants, professional development, courses, and other programming. AERA has a recent initiative, the American Psychological Association had a somewhat similar one, to fund small and intensive research conferences that could serve to catalyze new areas of inquiry or produce breakthroughs in areas that we might say are the normal science of the field. The issue is not just of revenue to recover the cost of journals, but revenue loss for these and other activities that are part of the mission of learned societies to educate and advocate for sound research policies, develop robust communication strategies about research, and so forth. And obviously that is contextually the same at this side of the pond as in ours. The possibility of removing one leg of the three-legged stool can be staggering to envision and requires an alternative model to sustain us. Thus, and I probably should confess that my mother, who's 98, is in good health and in good mind and a Pollyanna of sorts. She tries to look at the bright side, so I've tried to follow in her footsteps when matters like this present themselves to us professionally. For learned societies in U.S. social science, we are turning our attention to identifying ways of generating revenue through open access publishing that do not have adverse, unanticipated consequences and can produce the net revenue we need. We are also turning our attention to alternative revenue streams that we may realistically need to invent. Now a bit about the AERA Open Access Conference. In recognition of the importance of catalyzing a national discussion from the vantage of the social and behavioral sciences about this topic, AERA held a two-day small intensive working conference on open access publishing in the social sciences where we gathered together and tried to roll up our sleeves. I should emphasize that in 2008, AERA held a very useful similar meeting on online paper repositories and the role of scholarly societies. And this one on open access was for some time anticipated, well before the report here, and even well before the OSTP comment periods. As with this conference, we aim to produce a report quite soon and have it available by the AERA annual meeting at the end of April for discussion in a symposium. The conference brought together representatives from social and behavioral science associations, from STM fields, from the library world, from university presses and publishers, as well as researchers, journal editors, and open access experts to explore issues central to open access publishing and the critical role of social science associations in that process. The conference was structured to provide in-depth dialogue among the attendees on a series of issues that relate specifically to open access publishing within the context of the fields of social science. For example, sessions focus on, and breakout sessions and writing sessions focused on the costs and benefits of open access in the social sciences, finances and economic models for open access in the social sciences, building workable partnerships between and among social sciences, social science societies, universities, libraries, and publishers, and taking the lead and addressing government mandates, among other topics. The conference was immensely successful in that for the first time ever, I believe here as well, it brought together stakeholders from multiple sectors to explore the future of open access publishing in the social sciences. While agreement was certainly not reached on any or even on most topics, and while solutions were not identified to many of the most vexing problems we face in this area, the rich discussion illuminated the challenges social science societies face in moving toward open access publishing, identifying key costs and benefits to open access publishing, exploring various models of open access publishing within the context of the social sciences, and providing ideas concerning financial models and sustainability that can be explored and pilot tested as social science associations move to trying to unravel and figure out how to deal with the challenge of open access. Perhaps most importantly, the conference created a synergy among the participants and a shared vision that social science associations and their key partners in publishing need to work together to ensure that whatever the future looks like in terms of open access publishing, all of the key stakeholders need to work together. Further, this work needs to ensure a future that accounts for the needs of social scientists and the value added of our learned societies, and that is responsive to and respectful of the culture of our fields. It also needs to be done in a way that is financially feasible for social science societies. There were benefits that we reflected on and indeed articulated and emphasized. Attendees at the ARA Conference on Open Access Publishing identified numerous benefits. First, research could be disseminated to wider audiences, including scholarly communities, in an open access format. Researchers within fields, across fields, and to the greater public, to the media, and to policymakers and the government, among others. And I should say this is also, I think, coupled as it is here with the initiatives of expanding recognition of the social sciences with an increased emphasis on more effective communication on the value of what we know and the value of sustained investment in our sciences, including in basic research. Open access publishing could help to stimulate new areas of research as well as potential new journals. It could provide new ways of connecting researchers in disparate fields and stimulate inquiry into areas of study that cross-cut several areas of research. It could bring access to peer-reviewed literature to researchers in resource-poor institutions, to researchers not affiliated with academic institutions, as well as to researchers in developing countries beyond the excellent programs in which we currently participate. It could stimulate further connections among researchers focused on narrowly tailored areas of study within the social sciences. But we also, of course, observed the costs. These benefits came with costs that were also recognized and need to be addressed. Most have been noted at this conference. First, and this is perhaps the value of repeating some to underscore the similarity of our reflections and even maybe some of the redundancy of the message and the need to kind of integrate our messages. First, there are the financial costs to open access publishing, or more explicitly, the loss of subscription revenue that would occur from a shift to open access from the traditional publishing model. Open access publishing also has the potential to disadvantage social science researchers from less prestigious resource-poor institutions or who are independent scholars who lack the grant funds to cover the cost of author-pay fees, should this be the model that would be adopted. Even for those who, with grant support, the size of research grants in the social and behavioral sciences is far lower on average than in STM fields. The growth in open access publishing, as well as the increase in predatory publishers who are producing non-peer-reviewed articles, also has the potential to result in information overload, particularly for scholars looking for material outside their own fields of study, or for non-scholars such as policymakers and the general public who lack the knowledge and expertise to identify quality work from work that is of very limited quality. This situation, more a function of the internet world of information than of open access publishing per se, raises new responsibilities for U.S. social science societies on behalf of their fields and the public, without evident new resources to undertake this task. So then we addressed and turned to confronting the challenges for open access publishing in the social sciences. The primary challenge to open access funding, as underscored here in the social sciences, is to arrive at a financial model that works without reducing the large role and purpose that our scholarly societies serve to our sciences and to society. In the words of Donald Campbell, who's no longer alive, but a well-known and highly regarded social psychologist and social science methodologist in his own right, we need research data and, as he put it, reforms as experiments. Different funding models, such as the development of funds within academic libraries to cover the cost of author processing fees, have already been established by some U.S. universities. In theory, the funds gained by eliminating the cost of serial subscriptions in libraries could be shifted to funds that support the cost of open access publishing in the social sciences. For social science society publishers, the funds they receive in the form of author processing fees and article processing charges could replace a percentage of the subscription fees they have traditionally received and permit societies to continue to provide the range of services that support their missions. But mechanisms to provide the funds to cover author processing fees and article processing charges would have to be developed in partnership with publishing partners, federal funding agencies, private foundations, universities, and libraries. These mechanisms also would need to be monitored to ensure that they would not disadvantage social science fields and researchers. Moreover, the very large number of players suggests the potential of increased transaction and overhead costs. Experiments in open access publishing in the social sciences. There are not currently any federal mandates in the United States to make social science research available through open access, but many SBS societies are experimenting in ways to make some of their publishing available through open access platforms. For example, among AERA's 6 highly ranked journals, one, The Educational Researcher, is essentially an open access journal. This journal has been freely available online since 1998. Those societies with a suite of journals have greater latitude to absorb such costs, whether on their own or in collaboration with their publishing partners. In addition, AERA and a number of other social science publishers, as I noted before, allow authors to put toll-free links on their own websites or in their institution's archives that provide free access to the article upon publication, a point that we mention when we offer our comments and offer advice and counsel. Other social science societies are also beginning to make more of their research available through open access. The American Psychological Association, a kind of a mega publisher in its own right, has just launched its first open access journal, Archives of Scientific Psychology. The American Historical Association has also conducted several experiments over recent years on how to make some of the materials in its journal freely available while trying to do so in ways that do not jeopardize membership and subscriptions. And indeed, some of their experiments did jeopardize membership and subscriptions. This is a journal where reviews are highly valued, for example. Most social science societies no longer self-publish, with the notable exception, as I've noted, of the American Psychological Association and also the American Economics Association. But we now partner with publishers. These partnerships also provide an opportunity to engage in experimental reforms, and I really want to emphasize this. I think it's, well, we have different hats and we have different purposes, and perhaps we sometimes have different incentives. Many of the publishers and the publishing sponsors with us today are trying to work these issues out, both for themselves and I think laudably, in collaboration with us. These partnerships provide an opportunity to engage in experimental reforms. AERA, for example, is considering a cascaded open access journal or a broad general online journal that is not cascaded. And indeed, this will be a subject of our Publications Committee meeting in December of this year. Also, starting in 2013, AERA will work with SAGE, and this is just one example, as a participant in SAGE Choice. Under our arrangement, authors will be informed about the toll-free links that AERA already offers, or their authors for their own websites or their institutions upon publication. Also, they will now be informed that an article can be fully open access for a fee of $1,000 after publication. We are testing author interest, whether or not they have any grant requirements, at a fraction of the cost, 1/3 of the fee, $3,000 for STM journals in the SAGE portfolio. 1,000 still to me is sort of sticker shock, but it is a way of beginning to test, and the difference between this test and what we now offer is that toll-free links require knowing who the author is and seeking to find that person's work. Of course, one might find it in Google, but going to either the website or the author's website. The totally open access fee would lift the firewall and of course, be immediately accessible. So it's worthwhile. I think it's a worthwhile effort at least a comparatively more affordable rate than the STM charge. Other initiatives discussed at the AERA Open Access Conference are also possible that might provide for innovations across the social and behavioral sciences. There is, for example, a great deal of discussion in the U.S. about silos in science. It is worth exploring whether the social and behavioral science societies might establish a so-called mega-journal across social science fields. So such a journal would be self-consciously interdisciplinary and seek to move work of quality that is cross-cutting or emerging across fields from the periphery into the center of accessible scholarship, appropriately vetted for quality across fields. Such an initiative would not only address open access to knowledge, but also some of the challenges that can limit new cross-cutting or emerging forms of knowledge in our fields. And this was one idea that we played around with at the conference to try to see how open access might permit innovations in areas where we recognize in the social sciences and in science more generally some challenges. Attention to open access publishing also provides an opportunity to consider how knowledge will be increasingly aggregated in the future and how to retain the branding of journals in what is an increasingly article world. The shift to online publishing affords a context to examine how citations and metrics for scholarly impact are currently measured. For example, would article-level metrics such as altmetrics and other article-level bibliometrics provide more accurate measures of use and impact than traditional citation indices? Finally, and in conclusion, some of our next steps. Based on the AERA conference earlier this month and discussions across social and behavioral science societies and publishers, there is a sense that within the U.S., there is a short window of opportunity to become more visible advocates and to get ahead of the curve. There is general recognition of the value of open access to published knowledge, whether government-funded or not, and the need to develop models that can produce revenue and avert the downside consequences that are the very real objects of concern. Within the United States, our best intelligence is that the U.S. federal government will move in the direction of a broader requirement with respect to the principle of open access, but not seek to intervene with any prescribed business model of what needs to be done or how. So this is a little bit of a crystal ball, and I'd say my sources tell me that that may be the direction in which federal science policy will move. If this scenario is correct, and I hope I don't end up with egg on my face with this prediction, the U.S. will not follow the Finch Report, and there will remain some opportunity for the social and behavioral sciences to develop and test models for publishing transitions and change. Therefore, as I reflect on Stephen's second question, are there implications in the transition to Finch for UK researchers publishing in the US or US researchers publishing in the UK? I think the answer is no, or not ones that cannot be addressed by virtue of the current latitude provided to authors and funding agencies under the current US requirements and the publishing system. I thought, though, that I have one concluding comment based on AERA's Open Access Conference and the conference on the Finch Report. How might, in the coming year, which starts January, the UK Academy of Social Sciences, DBAS, which is the Division of Behavioral and Social Sciences in the National Academy of Sciences, and the US Social and Behavioral Science community take a next step together to help define and shape the terms of the debate and enlarge our voice. I hope that the follow-ups on this possibility as a priority under any scenario of our fields and our system of publication may be pursued, because even if we can cite the distinctions between the US and the UK system, in reality, we are tied, quite similar, and inextricably connected. I want to thank everyone for listening and for sharing your views.
Do come and have a seat, and we'll... Right at the back.
Hello, Lucinda Matthews-Jones from Liverpool John Moores University. I found it really interesting that you actually spoke about self-publication, and I think it's something that we've actually missed throughout the whole conference, is this sense that open access gold route doesn't always have to support the notion that we publish within a commercial avenue that pays for APCs. And perhaps what we need to be starting to think about is how we're going to maybe adopt alternative models of publishing in an open access format that enables gold route access and capabilities. And I suppose this might throw it out a bit more, in which maybe our publishers need to start telling us about how they actually add value to the work that we produce for them, and also through the process of actually being a part of the commercial sphere. So if we're going to provide them with the peer review system, I think we probably need to then start thinking about, can we actually do that within our own platforms of research? And I think in terms of the self-publication that you were talking about, it would be interesting for us to actually start to see other open access formats that work within this way and to be provided with examples. And let's try and adopt this self-publication model, perhaps in certain avenues, as a way of contemplating commercial competitive ideas. Because Finch always seems to be talking about the supporting of an ecosystem of commercial publications, whereas we're in a modern technology sphere. And I wondered if I could throw that back to you with my comment, is can you give us examples of these self-publication models, and how are they working? How are they financed? So are learned societies having to bring in their own money to finance them, or... That's it, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, the societies that continue to self-publish have been self-publishing, so they have their financial and subscription base, so they're reflecting on the same kinds of issues that we reflect on with our publishing partners. What I will say is, as we've talked together, for example, about the introduction of a mega journal, we saw that as something that could be self-published across societies. As we talked about a number of years ago, the possibility of an online paper repository, which many of our learned societies have, but we could aggregate across societies and offer a richer treasure trove of knowledge. So I think I would, frankly say at our meeting, we didn't work out the financial dynamics of how this would be possible to do. But one of the things that I would say about the current situation of our societies is that together we probably have some venture capital capacity. And it's that very capacity to invest in our fields that I feel is, and that we all felt is, most under threat. One of the functions of our societies is really field building. And the resources of subscriptions have been a backbone to field building. So would it be possible for AERA and the American Sociological Association and the American Psychological Association to partner with their own resources on a new product and use some of the instrumentality available through the internet and through online submission systems to do so? Probably yes, but would we be able to innovate in those ways? Were our publishing revenue base approximately one-third, dramatically reduced? The answer is probably no. And I think that's part of what we need to work on together.
Thank you. One last question here, and then we'll stop for lunch. My colleague from Salford.
Yeah, Martin Bull, European Consortium of Political Research and University of Salford. I didn't quite hear what you said at the end about the implications of the US going down a different road for authors who are submitting in, say, US journals and vice versa. And I'm thinking particularly of the decision that if, in the Research Excellence Framework in 2020, UK researchers are required to publish in their work in open access journals to have it evaluated. I'm just wondering what the implications are, how the US would view that. Would they just accept the fact that high-ranking journals in the US wouldn't be receiving UK submissions in the future?
I guess there were two issues. What I was saying at the end in terms of where I thought we were in the United States is that I think the best current intelligence as of Thanksgiving week in the United States, which is a national holiday, so things, sometimes Christmas Eve you get a new message before the turn to the next year, is that the U.S. federal government is not likely to issue a narrowly tailored policy on open access that will constrain or define what future business models would look like. Now, with respect to, and that would be a helpful window to be very clear about the values of open access, but to not mandate certain kinds of models. So I'm hoping that that is the way we see it unfold, and that what I've said here will, sustain itself as the new year begins. You were asking more specifically about whether that would create some kind of potential arrogance among U.S. journals with respect to how we would address non-U.S. scholars and their need for open access for their publishing purposes. And I guess that was the second question that Stephen asked. And what I was saying or trying to think through, and which we do need to think through, so it's not the perfect answer yet, is that our current models, and AERA parallels most of the other associations, does provide toll-free and links both to the author and to the institution's archives. If that doesn't upon a publication or upon online first publication, if that doesn't satisfy requirements, then there is the author fee model for those investigators whose work has been funded, who need to address the open access requirements. And the experiment I described hopefully would meet that need at what is, again, a high number for us all to hear, but comparatively a lower number than in the STM fields.
Thank you. It's time for us to stop for lunch. Just a final comment from me, which I think it is important to note. I saw, as Janet mentioned yesterday, and as the Finch Report emphasizes, and in fact, as Philip pointed out this morning, the Finch Report envisages a mixed economy with a combination of different methods of publishing. Many of these sorts of options have been raised today. So it is actually encouraging that sort of innovation. I think it's quite important for us to differentiate between what the Finch Report says and what Wellcome says and what Research Councils UK say about what they want to do with their publicly funded research. Although these things all came in a very tight window over a matter of weeks, they are actually different things. And this is all part of a process that we do need to disaggregate, which is one of the huge values of having these discussions today. I'd like to particularly thank you for your presentation. It is really important to get this perspective, and mirroring back the views on these issues from the US, I know, has been particularly valuable to our discussions today. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, and we are back here promptly at 12:30 to carry on with the afternoon session. Thank you.